Hey everybody, let's talk about community policing. Before we get to that, let's look at what we did in our assignments last week. One class had a discussion board. I tried to do this a little bit different because the discussion boards seem to get pretty much the same thing from everybody. And some students wait to the last minute or not necessarily last minute, but we'll go back and review some of the posts by other students and go, oh, well, that sounds good, and then just use the same information. The hard part with a online course is keeping everybody doing the full work. Hopefully that's well put. And so I try to throw something different in here. I hope you found that more interesting than the past discussion boards. Trying to look at an agency that was having, other agencies close by were having problems with minority communities and maintaining good relationships, and then some ideas from everybody to, as in the image of or in the position of a police manager, of coming up with program solutions to try to deal with it. And everybody went back to training. Or most everybody, and says, we have to train more. Well, the problem with training is cost. Not every agency has, 9,000 officers like LAPD, where you can pull somebody from one position and put them in something else while another person's in training. It's a very, time-consuming and expensive issue. So it has to come out of a budget, and for a budget to balance, you have to take money away from something else, whether it be training, whether it be some other program, whether it be hiring, whether it be an officer on the street, use one less officer. And there's a whole bunch of political considerations with that, of course. Now the other class had a written assignment on profiling. And what I wanted you to do was to look at the two types of profiling. Or I should say, the two concepts of profiling. The first concept is this idea that everybody profiles. You do it when you walk into 7-Eleven. For some reason, I'm stuck on that example. And you look around, and you see a guy who's dressed in a certain fashion, and they are have certain tattoos. And you go, oops, this looks a little creepy. I think it's time for me to leave. And that happens. And you just profiled somebody. And right, wrong, or indifferent, you have. And then there's the other type of, then police, of course, use that. Mendenhall was the example that I used. But Mendenhall's an old case. It's 39 years old. And the idea in Mendenhall was that the police could go up and talk to somebody and have what has become known as a consensual encounter. And if the person didn't object, didn't walk away, the police could talk to them. Some categorize that as a detention, but it was a consensual encounter. So with Mendenhall, we get that idea that the police can walk up to somebody, ask them a bunch of pointed, embarrassing questions, and then with that information, conduct an investigation, and eventually ask for a consent search, which they did in her case, and very intimate search, and they found what they were looking for. So you get to say Mendenhall. Then you move on to the idea of racial profiling, and Bennett versus East Point is probably the most blatant example of it in a formal setting. If you didn't have this assignment, you might take a look at Bennett versus City of East Point for a really good example of racial profiling, and something that I'm surprised that the defendants, the City of East Point, took to an appellate level, unless, of course, there's a whole bunch of facts that have been left out, which is, as you get and you go through more casework, especially in 340 and 350, you'll find from time to time the court just leaves out information that's inconvenient and doesn't help them come to a clear-cut, bright-line decision. Um, I just can't see how East Point thought that they should take this to an appellate level and basically be embarrassed twice. So, with that, let's talk about community policing. And I really want you to look at community policing with a critical eye. If everybody, every commentator, every police manager, every person walking down the street, community policing, community policing, community policing, and that's great if we could do community policing in the fashion that was envisioned by the academic world and later the professional policing as to how it would run. The first thing is that you would have foot patrols. Officers would be out and they would be walking beats and making contacts and doing things of that nature, and talking to people and developing this really strong community bond. Then you have the idea of community partnerships, that the police would go to community groups, church groups, religious groups, and put in every religion that an area might have, and develop relationships with not only the people in the church, but with the religious leaders. And then that kind of got morphed a little bit, and now you see police managers looking to develop political relationships with politically powerful people within a community and doing some sort of relationship or some sort of activity there with that group that at times will can be later benefit the police department. Because, here's the dirty secret, is people that are in political power talk to other people in political power. If they tell people what a great job Chief Jones is doing, Chief Gibbs, it's more likely that Chief Gibbs will keep his job longer. If those people start telling the mayor, the city manager, and council people what a terrible job Chief Gibbs is doing, well, Chief Gibbs may be out on the market soon and be looking for a new job. That's the unfortunate part of community policing. So, what's the problem, with foot patrol? Well, not every place is built like New York City. Unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of areas are trying to build places like that, and make city blocks and multi-story structures, that will look, like a modern New York, and of course bring along with it all of the crime problems that you see: domestic violence, auto theft, theft from autos, sexual assaults, all of those kind of issues. And then in areas that have a demographic structure that will support it, you may see large-scale drug culture, open-air drug markets and things of that nature that come along with that. So, as you read about community policing and you look at the information that I posted in the week's work, and then also as you do your assignments, look at community policing seriously. Can you honestly say, well, first off, every police department in the country is going to tell you that they follow community policing theory. And every department is going to tell you what a great community policing section they have, or the foot patrols or substations or all this kind of stuff. The difficult part is that most agencies really don't. They don't follow community policing but in name only. Now, what's happened though is that recruitment in areas has brought different types of people into police departments as employees. So that is ushering in some level of change on and different to different extents in different locations, locales, depending upon who the people are looking to hire. So your assignments will give you some idea. The reading, we'll look really heavily at the reading as far as how you're going to be prepared for an exam. The questions about how to define a community, the theoretical underpinnings, really important. The idea of how community policing, the 3 Ps, make sure you've got a good handle on that, what that means, as opposed to the 3 Rs we talked about much earlier in the semester. Make sure that you have an understanding of both of those. You may see those again. And then different studies, different commissions. And we talked about the commissions 2 weeks ago when we talked about policing the police. Those are important because they led the academic world to kind of question what the structure was of police departments and how they worked. Look at how agencies are supposed to work with each other and network. And so a lot of that happens, but a lot of that really doesn't. Many agencies, knowledge is power, and they withhold as much of their information and their data as they can. A perfect example, is a great example of this, is the idea of crime data. It wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that agencies started to get together and produce one large, definable, searchable database for the entire county. LA County did it first. San Diego did it first. LA County came in, Orange County. And it was really good, but boy, you were to avoid mentioning it in court unless you were directly asked. You didn't talk to other people from other agencies about the database. And you didn't indicate how that database could be used to help solve crime, what kind of capabilities it had. I mean, my goodness, you would have thought we had the strike codes from NORAD. So it was really interesting as to how that was looked at. But those are the things I'm going to want you to look at this week with community policing. And I really think that if you're a student of this and you're just not, trying to get through, punch this ticket in this class to go to the next class, but if you're really a student of policing, I'd spend some time again with the study that we talked about from Canada, the Barlows. It's an older study. I mean, it's 20 years old now, but they raise some really interesting points when you overview community policing, especially when you look at how the community reacted after Ferguson. Now, true, that was driven by a false narrative that was inflamed by the media, but it was really easily accepted by a community. And look at Trayvon Martin's another bright one. The communities accepted that as another murder of a person by the police. Well, the problem is that in Trayvon Martin, it wasn't the police. George Zimmerman was a private citizen. But are we getting the results from community policing we wanted? You might argue lower crime rate, but I think there's a whole lot of data and good information that indicates that lower crime rate comes from aggressive policing, proactive policing, stronger enforcement tactics. So, interesting week. You got a couple assignments, and other than that, we're getting really close to being done. So I will see you all in class.